The decision that changed everything came on a cold night above Titan, where the Galactic Council gathered under a chamber of glass and stars. Humanity's ambassadors stood there, proud yet anxious, draped in the worn flags of Earth. For decades we had clawed our way into the cosmos, buying our place at the table with blood, sweat, and unrelenting stubbornness. We believed we had earned respect. What we got instead was exile. The Council's decree was short, sharp, and humiliating. Humanity was stripped of its seat, its voice, and its rights to interstellar trade. They called us unstable, dangerously aggressive, unfit to join the great harmony of civilizations. Their words carried the weight of centuries of prejudice, as if they had been waiting for this moment since the first human starship broke orbit. Our delegation walked out in silence, but I, Captain Darius Hale of the United Terran Fleet, felt something else rising in me. Rage, not the kind that burns quick and fades, but the slow, steady kind that hardens into steel. The Council thought they had ended us with a vote. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. When the news reached Earth, the reaction was a mix of despair and fury. Billions felt the slap across their faces. Entire colonies panicked, knowing Council protection no longer extended to them. Trade ships were turned away at foreign ports. Our people were called outlaws overnight. But if the Council expected us to crawl, they forgot who we are. Humanity had never been welcomed in history. We had always taken what was denied. The first secret meetings began in the underground bunkers of Luna. Representatives from shattered governments, warlords, scientists, and soldiers gathered around old steel tables. There were no speeches about peace or reconciliation. Instead, there was one question asked again and again: if the Council won't give us a throne, how do we build our own? My fleet was small then, barely 24 ships, but I had men and women who would follow me into the mouth of a sun. If I told them there was a chance we'd spit fire back out, I saw the same hunger in their eyes that burned in mine. We were tired of begging for recognition. We would seize it. The plan was madness, and maybe that's why it worked. Humanity was fractured across hundreds of colonies, but exile gave us unity. The Council thought they had isolated us, but in truth they had given us a common enemy. We would for an empire, not through treaties, but through defiance. Every blacklisted colony, every abandoned outpost, every human left stranded in the void would be brought under one banner, ours. Our first target was the mining world of Charon, abandoned by Council patrols. The moment the decree was passed, pirates descended like vultures, enslaving our people and stripping the planet bare. I remember the night we struck back. My fleet dropped out of warp, guns hot, and for the first time in centuries, the pirates learned fear of the human name. We didn't negotiate. We didn't forgive. We erased them from orbit. Fire raining down until the skies turned red with their burning hulls. The survivors begged for mercy. They got none. That night we raised a new banner above Carrion, not the blue and green of the earth that betrayed us, but black, deep as the void, with a crimson crown carved into it, a throne of our own, built on fire and blood. The message spread like wildfire across the colonies. Humanity was no longer scattered people begging for scraps. We were uniting, hardening, becoming something the Council never wanted to see, a power they could not ignore. 1. Born out of betrayal and sharpened by rage, and as the first months of our exile bled into years, I began to understand something dangerous. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting to prove we deserved the throne the council denied us, and deep inside I knew we would not stop until the stars themselves bent to humanity's will. The black banner over Charon was more than a symbol, it was a promise. The first time I stood beneath it, the smoke of battle still rising from the shattered landscape, I felt something settled deep in my chest. The council had cast us out like dogs, but now we were wolves. Carrion had proven that our people didn't just want protection anymore, they wanted vengeance. They wanted a throne to kneel before, one made by their own hands, not gifted by aliens who had judged us unworthy. But winning a single world was nothing. Holding it would decide if we lived or died. Carrion was scarred, its cities broken, its mines stripped to bedrock. Pirates had left behind nothing but chains and ashes. The first weeks were chaos. Thousands of freed slaves staggered from underground camps, half-starved and broken. We had to feed them, clothe them, and remind them they were human again. Our fleet rationed what little supplies we had, and I sent salvage crews into the wreckage of the pirate ships to strip every last ounce of usable metal. I remember walking through the camps one evening, past the gaunt faces of miners and children with eyes too hollow for their age. A woman grabbed my arm, her hands shook as she tried to speak. You came back for us. I had no answer, only a nod. But the way she looked at me, like I was something more than a soldier, burned itself into me. That night I stood with my officers inside the shattered ruins of the governor's palace. There was Commander Roth, an old Marine with scars across his face, Dr. Elra Vance, who had once run one of Earth's research divisions before the council blacklisted her work, and Lieutenant Cray, young, reckless, and loyal to the bone. Together we laid out the foundation of something larger than war. We can't just fight battles, Elle said, her voice sharp. We need industry, infrastructure. If we don't build, we'll starve, and if we don't fight, we'll be crushed. Roth growled. The council's enforcers will come. Maybe not today, but soon. You know it. I let them argue because both were right. Humanity had always been torn between builders and warriors, but now we had to be both. We'll build on, carry on, I finally said, not because it's ready for it, but because we need to show every abandoned colony that humanity stands on its own now. Carrion will be our forge. From its ashes we'll shape our throne. And so we began. Ships left orbit daily, scavenging wrecks, raiding forgotten depots, even stripping down half-abandoned human colonies that were too weak to resist. Every bolt, every beam, every scrap of tech was dragged back to Charon and repurposed. The miners who once broke their backs under pirate whips now smelted steel for our warships. Children who had grown up in chains learned to carry rifles, their eyes burning with the kind of fury that cannot be taught. Word spread fast. Colonies that had been left to rot sent envoys desperate to be part of something bigger. Some came willingly, swearing allegiance to the Black Banner. Others resisted, clinging to the false hope that the council would forgive them. We gave them a choice, kneel or burn. Most chose to kneel. Those who didn't. Carian skies lit red again. Council could not ignore us forever. They sent their first response 6 months after the fall of Curian. I was on the command deck of the Iron Rain when the warning alarms flared. 3 sleek council frigates tore into the system, silver hulls gleaming with the arrogance of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. Their commander sent a message across the void: humans, you are in violation of the decree. Abandon this world immediately or be destroyed. I could almost hear the sneer behind his words. To him we were nothing but vermin squatting on territory we didn't deserve. I opened the channel and gave the only answer they deserved. This is human space. Leave or die here. The council ships laughed at us. In their way they thought 3 frigates could shatter us. They didn't understand the fury of a people who had nothing left to lose. The battle was savage. Our ships weren't sleek or advanced. They were patched together hulks armed with weapons scavenged from half a dozen sources, but we fought like demons. The Iron Rain drove head-on into their formation, shields screaming under the onslaught, while Roth's Marines boarded one of the frigates in a suicidal strike. I still remember his voice over comms. Ragged with blood and fire, we'll tear their throats out, Captain, even if we burn with them. By the end, 2 frigates were drifting wrecks, and the 3rd limped out of the system with its engines of flame. We had lost 5 ships and hundreds of men, but the system was ours. For the first time in history, the council had been forced to retreat before human steel. The news spread like wildfire across the colonies. Whispers grew into roars. The council can be beaten. Humanity can rise, but victory came at a price. I walked the decks of the Iron Rain after the battle, stepping over scorched plating and blood stains. Too many faces were gone, faces I had known, voices I would never hear again, each name carved itself into my memory like a scar. And yet I felt no regret, only resolve. Their deaths were not wasted. They had bought us legitimacy, the one thing the council thought we could never seize. In the months that followed, more colonies bent the knee. Carrion became the heart of a new empire, a throne world in the making. Factories rose where ruins had stood. Warships rolled off crude assembly lines. Children memorized the creed of the Black Banner. We bow to none but ourselves. But power always breeds enemies. Even within, some colonies resisted our rule, not out of loyalty to the council, but out of fear of what we were becoming. They said we were no better than the tyrants we fought, that our banner was just another chain, and maybe they were right. The difference was simple: we would never be the ones chained again. One such colony was Hellion Prime, a fertile world rich in water and resources. They refused to swear allegiance, claiming independence. I gave them warnings, offers, chances to join willingly. They spat on all of them, so we came in force. I led the fleet personally, the Iron Rain at the head. Helen's defenses were strong, stronger than I expected. Orbital cannons ripped through 2 of our cruisers before we breached their shields. On the surface, their militias fought like cornered beasts, desperate to defend their homes. For a moment I almost admired them, but admiration does not win empires. The battle for Helen Prime lasted 6 days. When it ended, the world burned. Its rivers boiled with wreckage. Its skies were black with smoke. Thousands died, maybe tens of thousands. I stood on the surface as the Black Banner rose above their capital and felt a heaviness in my chest. Was This conquest or slaughter, did it matter? The council had left us no choice but to become what they feared most, and yet, even as Hellion smoldered, more colonies flocked to us, fear and respect, two sides of the same coin. The throne we were building was no longer just an idea, it was real, rising in blood and iron across the stars. Still, in the quiet of my quarters, I sometimes wondered what we were becoming. Was this the destiny of humanity, or my own madness driving us forward? Were we building a future, or simply carving out vengeance in fire? The answer perhaps lay ahead, because as our empire grew, so too did the council's anger. They had underestimated us once. They would not make the same mistake again. Reports whispered of fleets gathering, vast armadas preparing to crush us once and for all. But I was no longer the captain of a desperate fleet. I was the commander of a people united by betrayal and fire. And if the council thought exile had weakened us, they were about to learn the truth. We were not asking for a throne anymore. We were building one, and if the stars themselves stood in our way, we would burn them down and shape new ones from the ashes. They came at dawn over Charon's skies, blotting out the stars we had bled to claim. For months we had heard whispers of council mobilization, fleets gathering at the borders, armadas swelling with ships from every corner of their empire. I had prayed it was exaggeration, the kind of rumors that traveled fast among frightened colonists. But the first time the council fleet broke warp above our throne world, I knew the truth. The council wasn't sending a message this time, they were sending extinction. I stood on the bridge of the Iron Rain as the tactical display lit up with contacts, dozens, hundreds. A sea of silver holes stretched across the void, each one gleaming with the arrogance of a civilization that believed itself untouchable. Frigates, destroyers, carriers, even dreadnoughts, their numbers dwarfed ours tenfold. Beside me, Commander Roth growled under his breath, his scarred face carved with a grim smile. So they've finally decided to take us seriously. Dr. Van stood stiffly at the back of the bridge, her arms crossed, her sharp eyes betraying a fear she would never voice aloud. This is not a battle, this is extermination. She was right. On paper we didn't stand a chance. Our fleet was a patchwork of scavenged ships and hastily built war hulks. Our soldiers were miners, refugees, and orphans turned fighters. Against the combined might of the council, we were ants trying to stop a storm, but ants bite. And humanity had teeth. I opened the comms to the fleet. Thousands of voices crackled back. Captains, pilots, Marines, colonists pressed into duty. I could hear their breathing, their silence. They're waiting for words that might give them strength. This is Captain Hale, I said, my voice steady, though my chest felt like a furnace. The council thinks today is the day humanity dies. They think we'll crawl back into the dirt where they believe we belong. They think we'll break like dogs under their boot. They are wrong. I let the silence hang, then slammed my fist against the arm of my chair. We are humanity. We have been chained, beaten, exiled, betrayed, and yet we rise. Always we rise. Today we do not fight for survival. Today we fight for our throne. Let the council choke on the ashes of carrion before they ever take it from us. The roar that followed shook the comms system. Cheers, screamed, curses, voices burning with fury. They were afraid. Yes, but fear and rage together make men. Dangerous, the first wave hit minutes. Later, Council frigates dove into the system sleek and fast, their weapons tearing through the void. Our outer defense grid flared to life. Ion cannons, missile turrets, and orbital mines. Explosions bloomed across the black as the frigates met resistance they hadn't expected. On the iron rain we drove straight into the fire. Plasma rounds hammered our shields, shaking the deck. Beneath my feet, Roth barked orders to gunnery crews, while Cray, reckless as ever, maneuvered us through enemy formations like a predator among prey. We rammed one frigate broadside, tearing its hull in half, then unleashed a barrage into another. Still, for every Council ship we destroyed, two more took its place. Ours bled into one another. The battle stretched across the system, debris fields growing so thick they turned the void into a graveyard. Human ships burned alongside alien vessels, their wreckage drifting together as if bound by fate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of men and women dying in fire and silence. But we refused to break. On the ground, Carrion itself became a battlefield. Drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, disgorging Council troops, towering soldiers in gleaming armor, bred for war. Our militias met them in the streets with rifles and knives, every alley turning into a killing ground. Children who had once known only chains now fought with stolen plasma rifles, their screams echoing through ruined cities. I received reports of entire battalions wiped out, but also of victories, ambushes, traps, desperate last stands where humans dragged their enemies down with them. Carrion bled, but it did not bow. By the third day, the Council had lost more than they had ever imagined. Not enough to tip the scales, but enough to wound their pride. And pride is a dangerous thing. On the fourth day, their dreadnoughts moved in. I will never forget the sight. The Sovereign of Unity, a ship so massive it blotted out half a planet as it descended into low orbit. Its guns unleashed storms of firepower that ripped entire human cruisers apart with a single salvo. Our fleet scattered like prey before a predator too vast to fight. On the bridge, alarm screamed, the hull shuddering as plasma tore across us. Cray shouted over the den, "We can't outgun that thing. We need to run." "Run," Roth snarled, "and leave Carrion to burn over my dead body. Then that's exactly what it will be," Elira snapped, her face pale. "If we don't adapt, we'll all be corpses orbiting this world." I stood silent for a moment, staring at the tactical map. She was right. Straight fight was suicide. But there was another way. Then we don't outgun it, I said slowly. We bleed it. We launched the plan within hours. Strike groups broke away from the main fleet, harassing the dreadnoughts. Escorts luring them into ambushes in debris fields. Suicide ships rammed their hulls, detonating reactors in white-hot bursts. On the ground, resistance cells coordinated strikes on the dreadnought's atmospheric support lines, cutting its supply of reinforcements. Every strike cost lives, dozens, hundreds, but with every sacrifice, the Sovereign of Unity bled. Its shields flickered, its escorts thinned, its guns grew slower, less certain, and then at last the moment came. We had one chance, and it was madness. The iron rain, half crippled and burning, would drive straight into the dreadnought's heart, not to destroy it. No human ship carried that kind of power, but to tear open its belly. Long Enough for Roth and his Marines, too. Bored if they could plant demolition charges in its reactor core, the beast might fall. Roth came to me before the mission. His scarred face was calm, almost peaceful. We've been fighting all our lives. Captain, this is how I want to end it. Taking one of their gods down with me, I clasped his arm. You'll be remembered. He grinned, fierce and wolfish. I don't care about memory, I care about fear. Make them remember humans bite. The iron rain plunged into the storm. Enemy fire rad, tearing chunks from our hull. Fires roared through the decks. Crewmen screaming as bulkheads collapsed, but Cray held her steady, weaving us through a curtain of plasma, until we slammed into the dreadnoughts' side with a shudder that nearly broke us apart. Roth's Marines poured into the breach, their battle cries cutting through the chaos. I watched their signals vanish, one by one as they fought deeper into the ship. Minutes stretched like hours. My hands clenched around the armrest until my knuckles bled. Then Roth's voice crackled through, ragged but triumphant. Charges set, reactors going. Critical, get clear, Captain. We pulled away, engines screaming as the dreadnought convulsed. Light flared from its core brighter than a sun, and then, with a roar that shook the heavens, the Sovereign of Unity tore itself apart. The shockwave ripped through the battlefield. Council ships scattered, their formations breaking. For the first time, the mighty Council Armada faltered. Humanity had slain a god. But the cost, the iron rain was barely holding together. Half our fleet was gone. Roth and every Marine with him were ash in the void. Carrion was a wasteland, its cities craters, its people reduced to survivors clawing through rubble. And yet in the silence, after the dreadnought's death, I felt it. Hope. We had stood against the Council's wrath and lived. Not only lived, we had bloodied them. For the first time in their history, the Council had been forced to retreat from a world they meant to destroy. That night, as I stood beneath the black banner over Carrion, the survivors gathered. Thousands knelt in silence, staring at the throne we were forging from blood and iron. I spoke to them not as a captain, but as something more. They tried to erase us. They failed. They will come again with more fire, more fleets, more hatred, but we are still here, and we will not stop. The Council may rule the stars, but humanity will rule its throne, even if we must carve it from their corpses. The cheers that followed shook the ruined streets. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was survival, and survival was enough to promise something greater. Because now the Council feared us, and fear was the first stone in the foundation of an empire. The ruins of Carrion still smoldered when we began to plan our first war of expansion. The Council had come to erase us, and though we had bloodied them, their retreat was not mercy, it was calculation. They would come again stronger, with more ships, more armies, more resolve. If we stayed on the defensive, Carrion would eventually fall, and humanity with it. That much was clear to me as I walked the streets of the broken throne world. Ash clung to everything, the walls, the air, the people. Children played among wreckage as if it were natural, because for them it was. Men and women cleared rubble, salvaged scrap, built makeshift shelters where homes once stood. Every face was weary, scarred, but alive. Alive because we had refused to kneel. Commander Roth had died in fire aboard the Sovereign of Unity, and his absence was a wound I felt every hour. His men, those who had Lived looked at me now with eyes that demanded I make his sacrifice mean something more than survival, I gathered. My counsel in the war chamber, Elra. Vance cold and calculating as always, with eyes that saw futures as equations. Young Lieutenant Cray, wild with fire and reckless loyalty and new leaders, rising from the ashes of battle. Men like Joran Kell, a miner-turned-soldier, his voice heavy with the weight of representing the common folk, and Admiral Severin, a former smuggler whose cunning made him invaluable in matters of war. We stood around the hollow table, its flickering blue light casting shadows across their faces. The council is wounded but not broken, began her voice sharp. They will regroup. Next time they will send not one dreadnought but a fleet of them. We cannot fight them from carrion alone. We need resources, shipyards, allies. We need territory. In other words, Severin said with a smirk, we need to stop waiting for them to come and start taking the fight to them. Cray slammed his fist on the table. Yes, let's hit them where it hurts. They'll never expect us to strike first. And if we fail, Joran muttered, then we doom what's left of us. We've already lost too many. I looked at them all. Each voice carried truth, fear, rage, calculation, but beneath it all, I felt the same hunger gnawing at me that had driven us from the beginning. We don't survive by hiding, I said at last. We survive by building. The council cast us out of their throne, so we'll build one of our own, not here, not just Corian. Everywhere, world by world, system by system. We will carve an empire from the stars. And when the council comes again, they will not face a people clinging to life. They will face an empire forged in fire. No one argued after that. The first target was obvious. Vase Prime, a council stronghold along the trade routes, rich in industry, defended but not heavily. More importantly, it was close. If we could seize it, we would not only an NBSP, the council's supply lines, but also gain access to shipyards we desperately needed. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Strike fast, strike hard, and show the galaxy that humanity was no longer caged in Carrion's shadow. We launched with everything we had left. The Iron Rain led the charge, its scars still raw, but its guns burning hotter than ever. Beside us flew the Black Crown, a new battleship cobbled together from the bones of wrecked council cruisers. Our fleet was larger now. Dozens of ships from colonies that had bent the knee after Carrion. Some were barely spaceworthy, others proud war hulks, but together they were the hammer we would bring down on Vevelis Prime. The battle was chaos. Council defenses bristled the moment we dropped out of warp. Orbital cannons spat fire and their garrison fleet rushed to meet us. Silver hulls gleamed in the void, numbering us 2-1, but where they had discipline, we had fury. Our ships dove into their lines with reckless abandon, tearing holes in their formations. Suicide strikes gutted their carriers. Missile barges from our patched together frigates shredded their destroyers. On the Iron Rain, I stood at the helm, barking orders as if every word could bend the stars themselves. Cray's piloting was madness, weaving us through firestorms that should have annihilated us. Sever's raiders struck from the flanks, sowing confusion in the council's lines, and then we unleashed our weapon, the Crown Breaker. It was Elra's design, a monstrous cannon cobbled together from stolen council tech and human desperation. Mounted on the black crown, it charged. With a shriek of power, then fired a single beam of searing energy that tore straight through the Council's command. Cruiser, one shot, one ship turned to molten slag. The tide turned by nightfall of Vevely's prime skies. The Council fleet was in ruins. Survivors fled into the void, their silver holes burning as they ran. We descended upon the planet itself, our drop ships tearing through the atmosphere, disgorging human soldiers into the streets of their shining cities. Veli's Prime had never known fear before that day. Its people screamed as our armies swept through, tearing down Council banners, raising the black crown in their place. Resistance was fierce but brief. The Council's garrison fought with courage, but we had something they didn't. Rage sharpened into unity. By the end of the second week, Veli's Prime belonged to us. I stood on the balcony of their great citadel, looking down at the conquered city. Smoke rose in the distance. My people filled the streets, cheering, chanting my name, chanting for humanity. For the first time I felt it fully. We were not just fighting anymore, we were conquering, and conquest changes men. The days that followed blurred into weeks. Veli's Prime became our jewel, our first true conquest. Beyond survival, its shipyards roared to life under human control, churning out warships faster than we had ever dreamed possible. Its factories supplied weapons, armor, food, everything we needed to fuel our growing empire. But conquest came with its shadows. I held councils with Elra and Severin, discussing resource allocation, ship production, expansion strategies. Every discussion seemed to tilt toward one question: how far were we willing to go? Elira argued for efficiency at all costs. Veli's Prime's people should be integrated quickly. Those who resist should be eliminated. We cannot waste time on mercy. Sever was more pragmatic. Fear works, but loyalty lasts longer. Give them reasons to side with us, and they'll serve willingly. But if they rebel, we crush them. I said little, because inside I was torn. Were we liberators or conquerors? Did it matter? Reports began to filter in of harsh crackdowns, executions, mass arrests. Entire districts purged of dissent. Some of it ordered, some of it spontaneous, as our soldiers vented their rage on those who had once cheered the Council. I told myself it was necessary, that this was the cost of empire, that Roth's sacrifice, Carrion's ashes, demanded we never falter, never soften. But some nights when the cheering faded and the silence of my quarters wrapped around me, I wondered if we were becoming the very monsters the Council had accused us of being. Still, the empire grew. With Veli's Prime under our banner, more colonies joined us, some out of fear, some out of hope. Our fleets doubled, then tripled. The black crown spread across the stars, painted on holes, burned into cities, etched into the hearts of men who had once been forgotten. And always the Council watched. They sent envoys, once offering terms, recognition, trade, even a seat once more at their table if we bent the knee. I refused. Humanity kneels to no throne but its own. I told their envoy before sending his ship back in flames. It was reckless, it was dangerous, but it was also truth. The Council could never be trusted. We had already learned that in blood war was inevitable. True war, not raids or skirmishes, but empire against empire. In the final days of Veli's Prime's Conquest as our new fleet prepared to launch. I stood again on the balcony of the citadel. Below me thousands of humans cheered, their voices rising like thunder. They did not see the man torn by doubts, haunted by the ghosts of Carian and Wrath. They saw only their leader, their captain, their emperor. And perhaps that was who I had to become. Because the council was coming again. And this time, humanity would not be the hunted. This time we would be the conquerors. The black crown spread across the stars. Like wildfire, from Charon's ashes to Veli's prime shipyards, our empire grew with a hunger that could not be sated. But conquest is like fire. Once it starts, it cannot be contained. It spreads, devouring all in its path, leaving only ruin or rebirth. I saw it in the faces of my people, where once there had been fear, now there was pride. Where once there had been chains, now there was purpose. But beneath the pride, beneath the fire, there was something darker too, rage. Rage that demanded not just survival, not just freedom, but domination. The council had given us exile. We would give them war. It began with raids across the border systems. Severin's fleet struck first. Swift and merciless, council convoys vanished into the void, their cargo stolen, their crews executed, outposts burned, stations shattered, worlds silenced. For every strike we made, our empire swelled. Warships were built from stolen steel. Colonies once abandoned now thrived under our banner. Each conquest became fuel for the next. But raids were only the beginning. We needed a campaign, a war not of desperation, but of design. I called my council to Veli's prime citadel, where the black crown now hung above the throne chamber. El Revance, calculating as ever, her sharp mind always 2 steps ahead. Cray, reckless and loyal, his eyes burning with dreams of glory. Sever, the smuggler turned admiral, pragmatic and cunning, and Jorankel, the miner's son, now the voice of the common folk. We gathered around the hollow table. Council space flickered before us, glowing with stars, roots, and strongholds. They are fractured, Elra said, her voice cold as steel. The council is not united in their hatred of us. Some see us as an inconvenience, others see us as a threat, but all of them underestimate us. That is our advantage. Sever leaned forward, his smirk sharp. Then we take what they don't guard, hit their underbelly systems. They think too far from war to matter. By the time they realize the threat, we'll have carved a kingdom out of their own flesh. Cray slammed his fist on the table. Let's stop talking and start striking. We've beaten their fleets before. We can do it again. Let's show them humanity doesn't just survive, we conquer. Joran frowned, his voice heavy. And what of the people on those worlds? Civilians, workers, farmers, are they to be sacrificed for our empire? They are not our people, said flatly. If they resist, they are enemies. If they submit, they are assets. We cannot afford softness. Their eyes turned to me, the weight of every choice pressed against my chest. We strike, I said at last, not blindly, not recklessly, but with purpose. Each world we take must feed the next war. Each victory must carry us closer to the council's heart. We will carve our throne from their stars, one conquest at a time. The first target was Vera, council world rich in agriculture, lightly defended, crucial to supply lines. We struck like lightning, our fleets tearing through its meager defenses before they could call for aid. On the surface, resistance was fierce. Farmers turned soldiers, militias, fighting with desperation, but desperation could not match the fury of humanity. For 3 days the skies of Vera burned, fields once golden with grain were blackened by fire, cities crumbled beneath bombardments. I walked through the ruins myself, watching as human soldiers raised the black crown above their towers. The people of Vera knelt, some with hatred, others with hollow eyes. I looked at them and felt nothing. They were not my people, they were spoils. After Vera came Drows, a mining world, whose riches fed council industry. This conquest was bloodier. The council garrison there fought to the last man, and our victory was carved in bodies. When the black crown rose above Drows, it was over a city of corpses. Each victory fed the next. Our fleets grew, our armies swelled, more colonies bent the knee, some willingly, others under fire. The council's outer rim began to fracture, its authority crumbling where our shadow fell. But with each conquest, I felt the line blur. Were we liberators or conquerors? Did it matter? The people cheered my name as if I were a king, but the ghosts of carrion and wrath whispered in my ears at night. The council could not ignore us any longer. They struck back at Drows, sending a fleet twice the size of ours. For the first time we were outmatched. The battle raged for days in the asteroid belts, fire and steel colliding. In silence, our ships were torn apart, their wreckage drifting like bones in the void. Cross Squadron was nearly annihilated. Sever barely escaped with half his raiders, but we did not break Elra's weapons, the terrible machines of war she built from stolen council. Science turned the tide. Plasma lances, kinetic cannons, shields, reforged with human ingenuity. Each weapon was crude, unstable, but devastating. One by one, council ships fell until the survivors fled. Drows was ours, but the cost was heavy. Thousands dead, ships lost beyond repair. For every victory we bled more deeply, and still the council came. Envoys arrived. Again, this time not with offers, but with warnings. They called us tyrants. They said we were proving them right, that humans were too violent, too dangerous, too unworthy of the stars. I laughed in their faces. You exiled us because you feared what we might become. Now you see what you created. Humanity will not be denied, not by you, not by anyone. Their envoy spat back. You are not building a throne, you are building a grave. Perhaps they were right, but it was a grave I would drag the galaxy into with me if it meant humanity stood above it. The campaigns continued. World after world fell, our banners spread, our fleets grew, our armies hardened. The council fractured further, some worlds whispering rebellion, others begging for more troops to defend against us. And through it all, my people looked to me, not as a captain, not as a soldier, but as something more. Emperor. I never asked for the title, but it followed me everywhere, on Carrion, on Vase Prime, on Vera and Drows. They chanted it in the streets, painted it on walls, shouted it. As our fleets returned from battle, some part of me recoiled. I was just a man, broken and scarred, carrying the weight of too many dead, but another part of me, the part that burned with the same fire that had carried us this far, accepted it. If I was to be an emperor, then so be it. Better a human emperor than a council's chained dog. And yet, the deeper we carved into the council's flesh, the more I felt the cost. Cities burned, millions displaced, entire worlds scarred by war. And though we grew stronger, I could not shake the question that haunted me in the silence of night. Were we building a throne or a pie? The stars grew hostile again. For years our empire had expanded, unchecked, striking into council space like a knife through soft flesh. World after world bent beneath the black crown, and for a time it seemed as if nothing could stop us. But victories breed fear, and fear breeds unity. Council, fractured and divided for so long, finally found its reason to stand together. That reason was us. Reports began flooding into Veli's prime. Fleets gathering not on the border, but in the heart of council territory. Dreadnoughts built in secret shipyards. Legions raised on worlds untouched by war, weapons of power we had only ever heard of in whispers. The council was no longer underestimating humanity. They were preparing to exterminate us. I stood at the hollow table in Veli's prime citadel, watching star systems flare red as enemy forces masked. My council was gathered. Elra, Sever, Cray, Joran, their faces were carved with tension. Elra's voice was cold, clipped. It is inevitable. The council will launch a united offensive. If they bring their full strength, our empire cannot withstand it. We must adapt. Sever leaned back, arms crossed, his smirk hiding unease. Adapt? You mean run? That's not exactly in our playbook. We cannot outrun the council, Elra snapped. But we can make them bleed. If they march on us, it must cost them more than they can afford to pay. Cray slammed his fist down. Then let them come. We've beaten them before. We'll beat them again. Every man and woman under the crown is ready to fight. They'll choke on our fury. Joran's voice cut through, heavy and tired. And what of the people, Captain? What of the colonies that did not ask for this war, yet now burn for it? Every victory feeds our empire, yes, but every conquest fills it with resentment too. You think they will all stay loyal when the council comes? Or will they turn on us the moment they smell weakness? The chamber fell silent. Joran had voiced the truth I had felt gnawing at me in the quiet hours. Our empire had grown fast, too fast. Fear and rage had united us, but fear and rage do not last forever. Beneath the black crown, cracks were spreading. I looked at them all. Council will come, that is certain. The question is not if we can survive, but whether we can endure long enough to stand as their equals. To do that, we need more than fleets and armies. We need loyalty. We need unity. Elira's gaze narrowed. And how do you propose we secure that? I hesitated only a moment before answering. We give the people something greater to believe in than fear. They follow the black crown now because it is strong, but if we are to survive what comes, they must see it as more than a banner. They must see it as destiny. Sever chuckled darkly. So you'll let them call you emperor? After all, I didn't answer because the truth was already written in the way my people looked at me. To them I wasn't just Captain Hale anymore. I was the man who had defied the council, who had given them fire when all they had known was chains. Whether I wanted it or not, I was their emperor. And if wearing that crown meant survival, then I would bear it. The council offensive came sooner than expected. They struck a drowse, the mining world we had taken months before. Their fleet was vast, dreadnoughts, carriers, legions of silver warships. Our defenses held for days, but the weight of their assault was overwhelming. By the fifth day, Drowse was lost. I watched the reports in silence as our fleet limped back to Veli's prime. Council had not just taken a world. They had sent a message. Humanity's empire was not untouchable. Worse still, whispers of rebellion began to stir in the colonies. Some resented the constant bloodshed, others feared the Council's vengeance more than they believed in our throne, on Carrion, itself the birthplace of our empire. Protests broke into riots. For the first time, the empire I had built felt fragile. I went to carry on myself. City was scarred, rebuilt from ashes. Its people hardened by fire, but now those same people hurled stones at our soldiers screaming for peace. I walked among them, unarmed, my presence cutting through their anger. Their voices fell silent as I stood on the steps of the old governor's palace beneath the black banner we had raised years ago. You cry for peace, I said, my voice carrying across the crowd. You cry for the council to forgive you, to take you back, but do you not remember what they did? Do you not remember the chains, the abandonment, the slaughter? The council does not want peace, they want us erased. If you kneel now, you kneel to your own graves. The crowd was silent. Some lowered their heads, others glared. Unconvinced, I raised my fist. We are humanity. We were cast out, betrayed, broken. And yet we rose. The council thinks we are fragile, but they fear us because they know the truth. We will never kneel again, not to them, not to anyone. The cheer that followed was not as thunderous as it once would have been. But it was enough to remind me that words could still bind us even when fear and rage faltered. But cracks within the empire did not stop with the people. They spread to my council. Sever grew restless, hungry for more raids, more spoils. He argued that we should abandon the throne worlds and become predators, bleeding the council. With endless strikes, Elra countered, demanding we focus on consolidating on science and technology that could close the gap between our fleets and theirs. Cray pushed for reckless offensives, each more dangerous than the last, and Joran spoke more openly of the cost of the lives burned away in our pursuit of a throne. Tension boiled. Council after council ended in shouting threats, near violence. For the first time I felt my command slipping, not from enemies outside, but from division within. And then came the betrayal. Sever broke from us. He took his raider fleets and vanished into the void, declaring himself free of the Black Crown. Rumors spread that he was negotiating with the council, trading loyalty for survival. When I heard, rage filled me like fire. Sever had been a thief, a smuggler, a rogue, but he had been ours. Now he was a traitor, and traitors cannot be allowed to live. I gathered my fleet and hunted him across the stars. For weeks, we pursued through asteroid belts and dust clouds until at last we cornered him at Arian's reach. The battle was brutal, brother against brother, human ships tearing each other apart in the void. I boarded his flagship myself, cutting through his guards until I found him on the bridge. He smiled as I leveled my pistol at him. You think you're different from me? Hail, you're not. You're just a pirate who painted himself as a king, and kings always fall. I shot him where he stood. When I returned to Veli's prime, I stood before the empire and declared Sever's death a victory, but inside I felt no triumph, only the hollow weight of killing another piece of ourselves. The council offensive grew. They struck not with single fleets, but with armadas. Every victory we had won seemed to shrink as their might bore down on us. And yet humanity refused to break. Elra's weapons became more terrible. Unstable reactors turned into bombs. Shields so volatile they burned ships as often as they protected them. Craze. Fleets fought like madmen, hurling themselves into battles no sane commander would attempt. Joran rallied the people, reminding them of the chains they had once worn, urging them to endure. And me, I became the symbol, not just a captain, not just a leader, emperor. The title was spoken openly now. It burned on banners, it echoed in chants. It carried in every message across the empire. I did not deny it anymore, because I understood the truth. The people needed more than a leader. They needed a crown, and so I wore it not as a gift but as a weapon. The council would come again with more fire, more fleets, more fury. They would bring their full strength to crush us once and for all, and when they did, I would be ready, because I no longer fought as a man. I fought as an emperor, and humanity would either rise to its throne or drag the galaxy into the abyss with it. The galaxy held its breath. For years our empire had grown, carved from fire and blood, from the ashes of Carian to the conquest of Vase Prime, from the raids on Vera to the mines of Drowse. We had defied the Galactic Council again and again, but now at last they were done playing games. Reports flooded my war table, fleets massing in every direction, armadas forming not just from one council species but all of them, aliens that had once bickered and schemed against each other now stood united, bound not by loyalty but by fear, fear of us. They called it the Purge War, a war not to defeat humanity but to erase us. Elra Vance studied the projections, her face pale in the glow of the hollow map. Their numbers dwarf ours tenfold, even with Veli's prime shipyards and Drowse mines. We cannot match them. Cray slammed his fist against the table. Then we don't match them, we bleed them, we break them until they choke on their own arrogance. Joran Kell, ever the voice of the people, shook his head. And how many will die for your pride? Whole colonies are starving under the weight of war. Every victory we win costs us more than we can afford. His words struck a nerve because I had seen it myself, the hunger, the exhaustion, the endless funerals. For every cheer when we raised the black crown, there were 100 whispers of despair. Our empire was strong, but it was bleeding. I stood silent, letting their voices clash. Then I placed my hands on the table and spoke the truth no one wanted to hear. They are coming to wipe us out. There is no peace, no surrender, no compromise. Either we stand or humanity ceases to exist. This is not pride, this is survival. The chamber fell quiet. Even Joran, for all his doubts, could not deny it. We prepare, I said, every ship, every soldier, every child old enough to hold a rifle. We will not scatter, we will not run, we will stand on the throne we have built, and the galaxy will break itself against us. Preparations began at once. Vase Prime became the forge of war. Its skies were black with smoke, its factories roaring day and night, churning out weapons, armor, and warships. Every scrap of metal was melted down, every hand put to work. Children trained in the ruins of old parks, rifles in their hands instead of toys. Farmers became soldiers. Scientists became engineers of death. Entire colonies poured their strength into the cause, and still it did not feel like enough. Elra came to me one night, her eyes alight with a feverish gleam. We cannot win by numbers, but there are other ways. The Council has weapons. Super weapons, I can replicate them. I can make something worse. I stared at her, seeing the edge of madness in her smile. And what will it cost? Everything, she whispered, but isn't that what we are already spending? I did not give her permission. I did not stop her either. Some part of me knew we might need her monsters before the end. The Council offensive began on the rim. 300 ships descended on Archon Station, a supply hub for our fleets. The defenders fought to the last, but they were drowned in fire. Survivors whispered of Council weapons that shattered shields like paper, that melted entire ships in seconds, days. Later, 1,000 ships struck at Vera. The battle lasted 2 weeks. When our fleet arrived, Vera was ash, its fields burned black, its cities leveled, its people slaughtered. Every report tightened the noose. The Council was not striking at our strength, they were stripping away everything around us, cutting us off, starving us out. Their final target was clear: Veli's Prime, our throne. The day came like thunder. Scouts reported the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Thousands of ships stretching across the void like a living wall of silver, dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, escorts, all united under one purpose: to erase humanity. I stood on the command deck of the Iron Rain, now rebuilt and reforged a dozen times, scarred but unbroken. Around me, the fleet formed ranks. Hundreds of human ships, each one a miracle of survival and defiance. Outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwilled. Cray stood at my side, his grin savage. Looks like the whole galaxy came to kill us. Then let's give them a reason to remember us, I said. The first wave hit like a storm. Council ships poured into the system, their weapons tearing through the void. Our defense grid lit up, orbital cannons firing, missile storms streaking through the black. Explosions bloomed like suns as ships collided, shields flared and hulls tore apart. The Iron Rain dove into the heart of it, guns blazing, tearing through frigates and destroyers. Cray's squadrons fought like wolves, weaving through enemy lines, ramming ships when their guns failed. But for every Council ship we destroyed, 3 more took its place. Their numbers were overwhelming, their discipline unbreakable. On the ground, Veli's Prime became a battlefield. Drop pods rained from the sky, disgorging alien troops into the cities. Streets turned into killing field. Civilians fought with rifles, knives, bare hands. The Black Crown flew above every barricade, every rooftop, every ruined tower. Reports flooded in. Entire districts lost, armies overrun, our lines buckling. Yet still humanity fought. On the 3rd day, Elra unleashed her weapon, a cannon unlike anything the galaxy had seen, built from forbidden science, powered by unstable reactors. When it fired, it tore through a Council dreadnought in a single shot, ripping it apart from within. The shockwave vaporized half a fleet. The cheer that followed was deafening, but the cost was worse. The weapon overloaded, detonating in a blast that consumed a dozen of our own ships. Elra stood before me. Afterward, her face hollow. I gave us a victory, she whispered, but I also damned us. I could not deny it. By the 5th day, Veli's Prime was burning. Entire continents were aflame, oceans boiling under orbital bombardments. Our fleets were shattered, our armies bled dry. The council pressed closer there, noose tightening around our throne, and yet we endured. Every hour we held was another wound in their pride. Every street we defended, every ship we refused to abandon was proof that humanity could not be erased. Craig came to me then, blood on his face, his grin as fierce as ever. This is it, isn't it? The end or the beginning, I said. He laughed, shaking his head. You always were mad, Captain, but if this is the end, then let's make it one they never forget. The Council's flagship entered orbit on the 7th day, a dreadnought larger than any before, its guns tearing through the last of our defenses. I knew then that the battle could not be won, but it could be ended. Roth had taught me once that sacrifice was the sharpest weapon of all, and now it was my turn to wield it. I ordered the Iron Rain forward, straight into the heart of the Council's fleet. Every gun fired, every missile launched, our ship screaming through the void like a beast in its death throes. Enemy fire tore into us, ripping apart our hull, killing crew by the dozens. Still we pushed forward. The Council's flagship loomed before us, its guns blazing, its shields shimmering. I gave the order, ram it. The Iron Rain surged forward, engines burning white hot. Cray laughed like a madman, steering us straight into the monster's heart. The impact shook the stars. Our hull tore through theirs, the void filled with fire and screaming metal. Alarms shrieked, fires roared. The deck collapsed around me. In those final moments I saw my people, children with rifles, miners with blades, soldiers with fire in their eyes. I saw Carian's ashes, Veli's Prime's banners, Roth's sacrifice, Severin's betrayal. I saw humanity, and I knew the truth. We had not built a throne of peace, nor of mercy. We had built a throne of fire. Throne the galaxy could never forget. The Iron Rain detonated, its reactor tearing through the Council flagship in a blinding blaze. The shock wave ripped across the battlefield, shattering ships, scattering fleets, silencing the void in one terrible moment. And then there was only silence. Whether humanity survived, I do not know. Whether Veli's Prime still stood, or if the Council finally finished what they began, I cannot say. But I know this: the galaxy would never forget the day humanity answered exile by building its own throne, not in mercy, not peace, but in blood, fire, and defiance. And that was enough. The fire faded, but the scars remained when the Iron Rain detonated inside the Council flagship. The shock wave tore through fleets on both sides. Dozens of ships shattered instantly, others drifted, crippled. Their hulls cracked, their crews screaming into the void. For one terrible moment, the stars themselves seemed to fall silent. Then the silence broke. The Council armada, vast and terrible, faltered. Their flagship was gone, their formation shattered. In that moment of chaos, what remained of our fleet struck with a fury born of desperation. Crazed squadrons hurled themselves into the breach, half their number dying in the charge. Elra unleashed every weapon she had left, her cannons roaring, her experiments tearing through enemy shields like fire through paper. Joran rallied the ground forces, turning the streets of Veli's Prime into a fortress of blood. The Council, for all its might, broke, not completely, not decisively, but enough. When dawn rose over Veli's Prime, their fleets were gone, retreating into the black. Throne world still burned, its cities reduced to ash, its people scarred forever, but it still stood, and humanity still breathed. Captain Hale. Emperor Hale was gone, his body lost in the wreckage of the Iron Rain, yet his name lived on. Whispers spread through the ruined streets, carried on the lips of soldiers, refugees, children. Hale had given his life to bring the council to its knees. He had shown that humanity would never be erased. He had become more than a man. He had become a legend. In the weeks that followed, the Empire staggered between survival and collapse. Our fleets were shattered, half our colonies burned, millions dead. The council was wounded, but not broken. Already their envoys whispered of another war, a vengeance yet to come. But something had changed. The galaxy had seen us stand. They had seen the council falter, and for the first time in history, humanity was not an outcast, not a curiosity, not an exile. We were a power, a bloody, broken, terrible power, but a power nonetheless. The black crown flew above the ruins of Veli's prime, raised not by Hale's hands, but by those who survived him. Croy, scarred and limping, swore to carry on his captain's legacy. Elra, her brilliance darkened by the weight of what she had built, poured her mind into rebuilding what we had lost, and Joran, weary and haunted, became the voice of the people, reminding them of the price they had paid and the chains they had broken. Together they held the empire. Together, barely. The years after Hale's death were not kind. Veli's prime never fully healed. Its oceans boiled with scars, its skies dark with ash. Carrion, the birthplace of our rebellion, fell into ruin again. Its people scattered, drows collapsed into rebellion. Its miners rising against the empire they claimed had become just as cruel as the council. For a time it seemed humanity would eat itself alive, and yet we endured because Hale's legend endured. Every child born under the black crown grew up hearing the story, the man who had defied the council, the captain who had risen from exile to emperor, the warrior who had rammed his ship into a dreadnought and lit the stars with fire. His name became a prayer, a curse, a weapon. Remember Hale, they said in the trenches. Fight like Hale, they whispered in the factories. Die like Hale, they swore on battlefields. Council feared that name. They spoke it in hushed tones, as if it carried fire, and perhaps it did. Decades passed, humanity rebuilt not in peace but in war. Veli's prime shipyards roared again. Stronger than before, new fleets rose. Sleeker, deadlier, forged from the lessons Hale had taught us. Colonies, once rebellious, were bound by iron and blood. The black crown spread not as a fragile banner of defiance, but as the sigil of an empire the galaxy could no longer deny. The council never launched another purge. Perhaps they could not. Perhaps they would not risk another wound like Veli's prime, or perhaps they finally understood the truth. Humanity would never kneel. Instead, they watched, they whispered, they waited. And humanity waited too, for Hale's empire was no longer one of survival, but of ambition. His throne, built from fire and sacrifice, still stood, and though he was gone, his successors carried the hunger forward. I remember the last time I stood beneath the black crown as an old man, my body broken from years of war. Joan Kell had long since died, his voice silenced by the weight of politics. Elra Vance had vanished into her laboratories, her mind consumed by the horrors she had built. Cray, mad, reckless Cray, had fallen in battle, laughing as he tore through a council Fleet with nothing but rage, I was one. Of the last left, the throne still stood empty but eternal, Hale's throne, not of gold, not of jewels, but of iron and fire. It was not beautiful. It was not merciful, but it was ours. I thought then of Hale, not as emperor, not as legend, but as the man I had once known, the captain who had walked through the ashes of Carian, who had raised the black crown above the ruins, who had led us into madness and glory. Alike, he had never wanted a throne, he had wanted survival, but in fighting for survival he had given us an empire, and perhaps that was the truest throne of all. The galaxy would never forgive us. Not truly, the council would never forget the fire we had unleashed, but they would never erase us either, because Hale had carved our place into the stars with his own blood. And as long as the black crown flew, as long as humanity breathed, his throne would endure, not in mercy, not in peace, but in defiance, always in defiance. Generations later, when my bones were dust and the empire had grown beyond anything we could have dreamed, children still whispered the story, not as history but as myth, the tale of the man cast out by the galaxy, the captain who became an emperor, the exile who built a throne. They whispered his name with awe and fear, Hale. And in their whispers I knew the truth. We had been banned by the Galactic Council. We had answered by building our own throne, and in the end that throne was not just Hale's, it was humanity's. Forever,